I call this meeting of the Urbana Historic Preservation Commission to order. Could we have roll call, please?
Mr. Hayes,
Present.
Ms. Novak,
Here.
Ms. Pagliuzzo,
Here.
Ms. Pollock is excused, Mr. Seiler,
Here.
Mr. Shepard is excused, Ms. Smith.
Okay, we have a quorum. Next item is any changes to the agenda. I don't think we have any changes. Next item then is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting from January 8th, 2020, which was a rescheduled meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Just one correction. My name is spelled incorrectly.
Consistently?
Only in one instance on page 9. H-A-Y-S, Hayes are very sensitive about the E.
Oh, and it's a vote one, too. Okay.
Everything else is fine.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else have comments? Motion to approve from someone?
I'll move to approve as amended.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved as amended. Do we have any written communications?
You received some handouts
Oh,
just
sorry.
now.
Stalled here.
Sorry. You received some handouts just now. These were some additional documentation provided by Mr. Fell in relation to his case.
Sorry. Okay, next item is audience participation. If you're here for something other than the public hearing that we'll be having in 1 minute, you can speak now. Otherwise, if you wish to speak, it would be preferable that you do that during the public hearing. Does anyone wish to speak about a different matter other than the hearing? No. Okay. We have no continued public hearings, no old business. The next item is new public hearings. I hereby open HP 2020-EH01, a request by Andrew Fell for a certificate of economic hardship at number 2 Buena Vista Court to replace original windows with new windows rather than restore the originals due to the additional expense and time required for restoration. As most of you know, we have a strict pattern to go through for conducting the public hearing, and so we start that with the staff report. Everybody gets a chance to speak. Everybody gets a chance to ask questions. It just has to come in order. Okay, Marcus.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Andrew Fell has submitted an application for a certificate of economic hardship to be allowed to replace all of the windows at number 2 Buena Vista Court. Mr. Fell had initially submitted a certificate of appropriateness application to repair and restore the house in that case, and this included replacing all of the windows. On January 8th, 2020, the Historic Preservation Commission approved the certificate of appropriateness with modifications. And I'll put those up on the screen here, including that construction be in general conformance with the attached site plan and elevations with the following exceptions: that the original windows except the kitchen window be repaired, except those windows that may need to be replaced to meet building safety code for rental properties. Acceptable replacements may be all wood or metal-clad wood to match the existing 9 light windows. After the HPC meeting, we met with Nick Hansen, who's the building inspector for the city, and he confirmed that sleeping rooms were required to have one egress window, so one window would be permitted to be replaced in each of those 2 bedrooms, which was advantageous as those windows were on the opposite side of the courtyard, so that they would be less noticeable. In addition, there is an egress window in the basement that would be replaced. And also then the kitchen window was permitted to be replaced as it needed to be modified to accommodate kitchen renovations. Following that time, along with some of the same discussion that went along in the certificate of appropriateness application, Mr. Fell submitted a budget and some other substantiating arguments about why being required to restore the balance of those windows would provide, would produce an economic hardship. And he requested that he be allowed to replace all of the windows based on the economic hardship argument rather than the appropriateness argument. So going back, we've got the properties located in Buena Vista Court between Elm Street and Springfield Avenue. The site plans have not changed. There are, I believe, 17 windows total, 13 on the main floor and 4 in the basement. Only the main floor windows were included in the budget, as those are the ones that he is most concerned about replacing. The certificate of economic hardship has some fairly strict criteria by which the Historic Preservation Commission is supposed to review and evaluate the application. There are 5 factors, and those factors will be analyzed in the case as they were in the memo, and staff will provide information that was given in the application as well as a staff analysis of each of those criteria. So along with the site plans, we do have the renderings still, they remain the same. Mr. Fell proposes to replace the original windows with replacement windows that are replicate the 9-light design. He did provide additional pictures showing the interior of the property. This shows the original 9-light windows. As Mr. Fell proposes to build out the interior walls to allow for addition of insulation, his methodology of construction is that the original windows are removed. They are either restored or replaced. They are put back in the original place, and then the walls are built out from where they are installed. Actually, sorry, scratch that. The walls are built out and then the windows are installed, but the windows have to be back and ready to install then before the walls can be fully built out. Sorry for the confusion. There is a lovely picture in here that helps explain that. So here shows the demolition of the property, the interior.
Could you clarify demolition rather than?
Sorry.
Yeah.
The interior walls have been gutted to facilitate the later rebuilding out of the walls. There was extensive water infiltration, so there's a large hole in the ceiling, a large hole in the floor. The windows, after the original windows were boarded, were removed. Boards were put in place and are awaiting further construction activity. This is the front room of the house. This is some spots where the original windows are still in place. Excuse me, these are the storm windows, the aftermarket storm windows that were left in. These are, I believe, on most but not all of the windows. So some portions did not need to be boarded and have the storm windows. So this is the final outcome of the certificate of appropriateness. 4 windows were permitted to be replaced, and then the balance were required to be restored. This is the budget that was submitted. As you can see, the purchase price was $29,000. The proposed refurbishment of 11 of the upstairs windows came out to be almost $20,000. If all of those windows were restored, including the basement windows, they'd be closer to, I think, $23,000, $24,000 than if storm windows were wanted to be made and installed. That would be an additional cost. The replacement windows, as they are double paned, thermally unbroken windows, would not require a storm window. So although the quote in here is for $19,800, it would be more than that if storm windows were to be created and installed. The quote also did not include, for restoration, did not include removal or transport or picking back up and reinstalling. Whereas I believe I will leave it to Mr. Fell to remind me whether or not the quote for replacement included installation, or if that was simply just the purchase price of the replacement windows. So going on to this is the picture that I referred to regarding the change in the window gap. So currently we have the exterior of the building, the brick sill. We have the storm window here and the window's existing current placement. It's roughly 3.5 inches apart. When the wall is built out here with the studs and the additional insulation, the gap is going to increase from 3.5 inches to 7.75 inches. One of Mr. Fell's arguments was regarding the reduced energy efficiency of this based on the production of convective air currents that would more easily facilitate heat transfer from the outside, from the inside of the house to the outside. So when the commission is considering the 5 factors, they are to approve the issuance of the certificate only if it finds either that the subject property cannot be put to any reasonably beneficial use, or that the applicant will suffer a substantial economic loss, and in either case further finds that the hardship was not created with the intent of circumventing the article. So either no reasonable beneficial use, or suffering a substantial economic loss. So I'm not going to read the memo to you. I'll hit the highlights of each of the criteria. Regarding the fair market value of the property and its potential decrease as a result of the denial of the certificate, Mr. Fell does not assert that restoring the windows would reduce the fair market value of the property. He does indicate that he intends to rent out the house, but did not provide a lease amount or what that would have to be to get a reasonable return on his investment. Staff believe that the fair market value of the property could be higher or lower if the windows are restored rather than replaced, depending on the quality of the job for either of those options, and also for the preference of the purchaser. Somebody could like nice old original windows in good shape. Somebody could rather have replacement windows that they don't have to worry about. Since it's uncertain whether denying the requested certificate of appropriateness would negatively affect the fair market value, staff believe that this factor should weigh either neutrally or against an overall finding of economic hardship. The second criteria is whether or not denying the application would create a substantial decrease in the financial return to owners of record. In the application, Mr. Fell states that the window restoration would take an additional 10 weeks to complete. This delays the rest of the construction project because the windows need to be back before they can continue to build out the walls. Staff believe that this projected 10-week delay could create a loss of up to 3 months of rent. Staff are not engineers or contractors. We're not sure if it's possible that the walls could be built out and then the windows could be installed. Mr. Fell asserts that the windows really need to be back before they can do the interior wall reconstruction. If the restored windows are less energy efficient, this might result in higher energy bills, which might make the property less desirable and command a lower rent. That may or may not be the case. Staff do not feel that these two items constitute a substantial decrease in the long-term financial return for the applicant. It would certainly be a substantial economic hit in the short run, but in the long run, we don't feel that it is a substantial decrease in the financial return. Third, that the cost of the proposed construction and any additional cost to comply with the recommendations for the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. Wanted to reiterate that staff have suggested on several occasions that Mr. Fell obtain additional quotes to restore the windows. We have not seen any additional quotes to this time. In the application, the additional cost for the window restoration is the main factor that Mr. Fell focuses on for his claim of economic hardship. The quote from Restoration Works is approximately $1,800 per window. The total cost for the entire project is roughly $164,000. Mr. Fell states that replacing all windows would reduce the budget by almost $18,000, around 11% of the total budget, to $146,000, and reduce the time the house is windowless by 3 months. Staff calculated that a per window savings of $1,300 for 11 windows yields a savings of over $14,000, or a 9% project budget savings. So close to what Mr. Fell found. Mr. Fell also later submitted a statement that because the windows are out of the house, he had to pay an additional heating cost of $430 for 3 weeks. So this factor deals with the additional costs that may be imposed by the certificate of appropriateness. Staff believe that without additional quotes for window restoration, that an objective analysis of this factor is not possible at this time, and that this factor should weigh either neutrally or against a finding of economic hardship. The fourth factor is the structural soundness of any structure on the property. Mr. Fell doesn't assert that restoring the windows rather than replacing them affects the structural soundness of the property. In this case, staff believe that the certificate of appropriateness doesn't affect the house's structural integrity and therefore should weigh against an overall finding of economic hardship. And finally, the economic feasibility of rehabilitation or reuse of the existing structure. In the application, Mr. Fell doesn't assert that restoring the windows will eliminate the possibility of rehabilitating the house, only making it more expensive and presumably less profitable, especially at the outset. He does state that the restoration quote he has is from the Premier Window Restoration Company normally available, and he plans to do the job right. He hasn't obtained quotes from other window restoration companies, which would allow an objective analysis of the methods and costs of choosing another window restoration option, which links back to the third criteria, which is the economic hardship. Staff believe that other restoration companies are available who do high-quality work, and the other providers may be able to complete the work for a lower price and to a high standard. Maybe is not as high as his original quote, but still acceptable. Additionally, a local provider may reduce the window restoration time, speeding up the total project time and the time that the house is without windows. Therefore, staff believe that this factor should weigh against an overall finding of economic hardship. The Commission may approve the requested certificate of economic hardship, as we said, only if it finds that the subject property cannot be put to any reasonably beneficial use, or that the applicant will suffer a substantial economic loss if the application is not approved, and in either case, that the hardship was not created with the intent of circumventing the historic preservation ordinance. In summary, Mr. Fell has submitted this request for a certificate of economic hardship. He has provided a budget detailing the project costs and estimated savings of materials if the request is granted. Options that the Historic Preservation Commission has is to grant the requested certificate of economic hardship if it comes to the necessary findings, or to deny the certificate if it does not come to the necessary findings. Should the Commission choose to deny the application, the petitioner has two options: to appeal the denial of the original certificate of appropriateness to City Council within 15 days, or to appeal the denial of the certificate of economic hardship within 15 days of the notice of denial. Based on our findings and without the benefit of any additional evidence, staff recommend that the Historic Preservation Commission deny the request for a certificate of economic hardship. And Mr. Fell is here, and I believe wishes to speak to the Commission and answer any questions.
Are there, are there any questions of Marcus without entering into discussion? No questions.
Okay.
Oh, no, Kim.
Could you just summarize what the additional cost or the savings, if they would replace those windows, would be $14,300, and you're estimating 3 months of rent
Right.
on top of that, and then whatever additional cost for heating the structure during that time, that would be the total.
That would be, I think, a bare bones, simplistic reduction in costs. One can come up with a bunch of different other things as well.
Right, but that's, okay.
Any other questions for Marcus? Okay, thank you, Marcus. Next, we can have the petitioner, Mr. Fell, speak if you so wish, and present evidence.
Good evening, and thank you. Again, I want to say I appreciate your efforts and what you do on behalf of the city and preservation. I don't always agree with your decisions, but I always appreciate what you do and the effort you put into it. So I want to start with that. To me, there are really two issues here of the economic aspect of this, and one is time and one is money. So I'll start with the money aspect of it first. And it's not just the cost of getting the sashes and the storms refurbished. That is probably less than half the economic impact of what happens with this. Now, I have a quote, or an estimate, because no one will give me a quote, from Restoration Works to do this, the sashes and the storm windows, and they are the best company available. Now, I don't have a quote from another company, and I have been repeatedly told by members of this commission and city staff there are cheaper people I can find. Well, I found the best person to do it, and frankly, I'm kind of at a loss why I'm being advised to use someone less than the best. That seems counterproductive to what your commission should be about. I found the best vendor I could find, and this is what they cost. So once we factor out the egress windows, the cost from Restoration Works is about $24,000. So for sake of argument, I'll acquiesce, and let's say I have a vendor that will cost half of that. So I'm going to find a vendor to restore the sashes and the storm windows that I have, because I don't have all the storm windows, for a cost of $12,000. So the windows that were approved as the replacement windows in the last meeting to do the entire first floor of windows, that is a cost of under $7,500. So I'm $5,000 in the hole already, and I haven't done anything yet. As Marcus pointed out in my sketch, this house had no insulation and no real way to run utilities in the exterior wall. So we framed in a 2x4 wall around the exterior. And because these windows open in, the hinge is on the inside face of the wall. So my wall is now a little bit more than 4 inches fatter. So I have to move the hinge back inside the house, and I have to rebuild the entire frame of this window to extend that jamb out and still let the window fit where it needs to fit on the inside. Each one of these windows were site-built. None of them are the same, so every single window opening has to be individually framed out and custom fit. And I got a price from an estimate from a finish carpenter to do that, and he gave me an estimate of 10 hours per each window opening. So that's 11 windows he would have to do at 110 hours, and I'm into him for about $5,000 just to get the window now, the sash, installed in the opening. In addition to that, we haven't dealt with the storm windows yet because they're also now a different size. They've been sanded down and refinished, so the storm windows on the outside also have to be refit. I'm going to throw in an hour per window to do that, so now we're another $1,000. The windows now have to be caulked, primed, painted. All new hardware has to be installed. I have to take all the hardware off to take them to Restoration Works, and I don't get any of the the hardware is unusable, so I have to install all new hardware. Mortise in the hinges. Weather strip the windows, and my finished carpenter has given me an estimate I think is very low of 3 hours per opening to do that, another approximately $2,000. The last thing that comes into the cost is none of these windows have screens. There were no screens. The Urbana Property Maintenance Code requires every operable window to have a screen. So I have to have screens made for every window opening.
Is that just for rental properties or any property?
That, it's in the property maintenance code. It's for rental properties, and this is going to be a rental property, so I have to do it. I have a cost to build screens at $420 a piece, so that's another about $4,600. So all total, the cost, using more economic vendor to refinish the sash and the storms, that total is $24,620. The replacement windows, the type that were approved to put in the egress openings in the house, are custom sized to fit the opening. They don't need storm windows because they have a thermally broken sash. They have screens. They have all the hardware. They're pre-finished. So the only thing I have to do to these windows to put them in is literally scrape the window opening after the old window is out, take off the brick mold, put the window in, and brick mold goes on. So the difference in these two, rebuilding all the existing windows and jambs and sills versus replacement windows, is $17,165. That's using the more economic vendor. If I use Restoration Works, we're at $29,000. That's more than I paid for the house. Okay. Now I'll touch on the time aspect. And unfortunately, the first part of the time aspect for me has to be, I had all the information for this meeting into the city staff to make the February meeting. I cannot tell you why that meeting wasn't called. All I know is I had all the information into the city and there was no meeting. So that pushed this a month back. So 4 weeks of this time is on city. It has nothing to do with me. It's city staff or getting a quorum. I don't know why I couldn't get it. So the rest of the time is Restoration Works wants the windows a minimum of 10 weeks. So during that time, and I'm almost to the point now where I can do no more work on the house because it's not secure, and I'm not going to wire it when it leaks. I'm not going to drywall it. I'm not going to insulate it. And pretty much it's going to be at a standstill probably by the end of next week until the window issue is resolved. So we have 10 weeks for the windows to be gone, and hopefully I can get them right away when they're done. The finished carpenter with a helper can get them in 3 weeks. So we're approximately, altogether now, we're about 22 weeks out. I'll count that as 20 weeks, and I would rent this as a rental property. This would rent probably on the low side, $1,000 a month, so there's $5,000 of rent that I lost. I won't go over a whole bunch of what Marcus said, but, I mean, kind of at the end, it's going to cost me at least an additional $23,000 and 22 weeks of time to do this by the time we figure in the cost of the windows and getting them installed and the lost income. And I don't have an extra $23,000 or 22 weeks to spend on this little project. I can't say on the low end of $23,000 using an economic vendor or on the high end of $34,000 for restoration works is an economic hardship to any of you, but it certainly is to me. So I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Pell?
I do have a question, which is when I look at Exhibit C with your drawings, can you help me understand why you need to wait for the window to come back in order to do this build out? And I ask that only because it looks to me here like I see where the hinge is. I understand what you're saying about having to open it. I have seen examples of this, I mean, where they beveled the wall actually to accommodate that, so you don't have to have it bump out so far. But I don't understand why everything hangs for that period of time. The progress with putting in the insulation, which is a great thing to be doing, why does it hang on the windows being present?
Because the building's not weather tight. I mean, I don't want to install outlets in here that are going to get rained on. I mean, there's a certain limit to what I'm willing to risk of installing in this building and have ruined, and a risk I don't want to take. And the unfortunate reality of this project is I hope you can all realize that this is a money pit of a project. It's a stupid project to take on, right? But I was willing to do it. I don't have any extra pennies to spend on here, right? I can't wire a room that's going to get wet and have to rewire it. There's no money to do that.
I was just asking the question for clarification, yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a follow-up question to that. Based on the pictures, it looks like all the windows are boarded. So is the house open, or are all the openings boarded up?
Some of them are
Or
boarded up and
have
some of them are
storms.
not, because some of the aluminum storm windows are still on the outside. Some of those have sashes missing. Some of them are completely missing. So it's just a whole hodgepodge of what's there now.
So some of the window openings are actually open to the elements?
Almost all of them are, yes.
Okay, because most of the ones I'm looking at in these pictures are boarded.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking the
Correct,
question.
yeah.
But for clarification, you took the windows out purposefully, right?
Yes, yes. Two of them were gone when I got the house. One of them was completely gone.
But you
and
also took the windows out before you had a certificate of appropriateness that would have permitted you to take the windows out.
Yes, I did.
Any other questions from the commission? Thank you.
One thought about moving the windows to the inside of the new wall. Would it be possible to just create a pocket for the window to open into?
Yeah, but anything is possible, but
it's
there's
just-
a diminishing return on what is reasonable to expend to make all these custom things like that.
Well, I mean, that would be a lot simpler than building a new frame and moving the window forward.
Not really. I mean, not in my opinion. I still have to case the window out, and I'm trading one expense for another, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, it's just a thought.
Is there a concern about condensation when you increase that airspace to 7.5 inches?
Absolutely. An
That
airspace
was-
over about 4 inches is worthless. So it's almost pointless to put the storm windows on, but
It's the condensation that I would be concerned about.
I guess I have a question based on that. Have you heard of Indos? They're inside storm windows. I know that Pierre Moulin used them in his entire renovation of the ZTA house.
we have used those, but
You get in-
my windows
Right.
open in.
But if you're worried about storm windows for condensation during the winter, the window is going to be closed anyway, correct?
I assume so, yes.
And then, I mean, we're talking about economic hardship at this point. I understand what you're saying about wanting to use the best restoration. You found the best restoration company. I have a historic home too. It's not a landmark, but was built in 1907, maybe 1905. And I used someone that was not the vendor that you've contracted with or have spoken with. I had 11 double-hung sashes done, so 22 sashes, and it was less than $7,000. And that was for them to come in and remove them, take them back bead them, totally reglaze them, prime them, sand them, bring them back, reinstall them, put in new sash ropes, and weather strip them. So, and I pride myself on the fact that I have an old home and that I saved those old wooden windows. And although it was a chunk of change, it wasn't anywhere near the quote that you received. And I certainly want the quality of those windows to last another 120 years. So I don't feel like using someone other than the vendor you've spoken with reduces the quality of my renovation. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Any other questions of Mr. Fell? Dave? No? Okay, thank you. Next, we can hear from any other proponents who support the economic hardship, if you wish to speak. And if you would, sign in. I think you've been through this before.
I was going to say, I was here for the appropriateness certificate.
Sorry, we
didn't
need
explain myself very well.
we
but
need you to
speak up.
yeah, in the microphone. Yeah, sorry.
Is it okay if I come closer and just?
No, we have to be able to pick you up on the microphone for the recording.
Oh, I'm being recorded?
Yes, you're on TV.
Is this good?
I think that'll work.
All right. I am here to support Andrew, who is a gentleman I had never met. We don't know each other. But all of those of us who own a bungalow at Buena Vista Court are so pleased that he made the stupid decision to buy this particular bungalow that's totally falling apart and has just been a real eyesore, and trying to take it back to as much of the original Spanish architecture of little bungalows. So we're happy to have him there, so I want to support him. But there's another reason why I want to come to support him, and that is I find it really hard that as a commission, and I totally understand why you are here, and I really appreciate historic preservation, all of that. But in this case, the expense, even if you find someone that's less expensive, is just so much, when in fact we had bought our little bungalow maybe 9 months before it was made into historic preservation area. And unfortunately, I did not have the money or the time. We use ours as a rental property. I didn't have the money or the time when we first bought it because we had to almost gut and redo ours on the inside. But as an owner of rental properties, I can tell you that not having double pane windows for energy efficiency is a real downer on trying to get properties rented. And I took some photos of some of the existing, I mean, there's a couple.
Sorry, can you not talk until you get back to the microphone, please? Thank you. The microphone just won't pick you up when you're, okay.
I took some photos of some of the existing bungalows to show that the two in the center are actually our bungalow, and if you see the porch roof that is on there, we purchased our bungalow from the original owners, and she had explained that in 1956 they took out the original porch roof and put this lovely aluminum, as I call it, a Sears awning for a front porch roof. And originally, until last summer, it was green and white striped metal aluminum. And when it was determined that we could become an historic preservation site, no one told me take down that ugly roof because it's not fitting the era. I kind of wish they would have, but so we're stuck with that. Then the other center photo that's of our bungalow. Last summer, I also paid several $100s to have someone reglaze, prime, and paint our original 9-light windows, but ours were in pretty good shape, unlike the ones in Bungalow 2. So, but the reason why I took the photo is, as a rental property, we have to provide screens. There were no storm windows available, so we just got the storm windows with the screens. And to me, it just destroys the whole look anyway. When you put those storm windows on those beautiful 9-light windows, it kind of destroys the look. Okay, so on the top row, on the left, is one of the nicest bungalows in the courtyard in terms of it maintaining the structure architecturally and all of that. But they had put in new aluminum double pane, double sash windows. And so they're okay to have those because they were in there before you guys made us historic. The one next to that one, I didn't, because I was quickly doing this before coming, I didn't put the photo properly in the collage thing. What I wanted to show, that's Bungalow 8, and it has a disability ramp going the full length of the front of the bungalow, which is ugly because it looks nothing like a little Spanish Revival architecture. But if a person who lives there needs a ramp, are you going to make them, build an elevator or something? I don't know. Anyway, the bottom two are Bungalow 7. That's Rebecca's bungalow. It's painted a lovely blue, but in addition, look at the addition. They built up on it to make a second floor. To me, that's nothing in keeping with the kind of design that Andrew wants to keep. I mean, it looks nothing like a little Spanish bungalow. So my point is, if we can get someone in the courtyard who's willing to put as much time and money as he already has, but he's got about 10 times more to go, who's going to keep the little bungalow as close to the original kind of design architecture of that era, I hate to see him have to quit the project or go bankrupt in order to keep every little detail. So that's kind of why I'm here. I wish you had picked on, even though Rebecca is a doll, she's terrific, but her bungalow it just destroys the whole look to me of.
We're not here to pick on people for
Okay.
clarification. I mean, we're following and implementing the ordinance the city established over 20 years ago.
But if that could have been considered part of this historic site without making it go back to its original
Well,
architecture,
the review process provides for people not having to make changes to make something look more historic or to restore something at that particular time. So the ordinance assessed all the bungalows for integrity, and there's significance for the bungalows as a group as well. So if there would be more of an impact if a couple of the bungalows were missing, and not the entire district was left. But as it was at that time and still is, there's a great deal of integrity for those buildings. And they're on the National Register of Historic Places as well as locally landmarked. And they were on the National Register before they were locally landmarked. So, does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
that's it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to present evidence supporting the certificate of economic hardship? Is there anyone who wishes to present evidence against the certificate of economic hardship? Yes. And our procedure is that you sign in, and if you would state your name, just to make it easier for conversation. Sure, you can if you want. Yeah.
Is this all right? Can you hear me all right? Okay. Good evening. My name's Susan Apple, and I'm president of the PACA Board of Directors. I'm here to address the request for a certificate of economic hardship brought by Andrew Fell. I applaud his effort to renovate number 2 Buena Vista Court, but essentially I'm confused about what he's trying to accomplish with this request for this COE. As an architect well acquainted with the difficulties of working with historic structures, Mr. Fell has received a number of heritage awards from PACA for his past preservation-sensitive work. He often cites those awards as evidence of his skills. With that background, he would surely have been fully aware of what was ahead of him when he purchased this house. I also assume he was fully aware of the building's status as part of a local landmark historic district, because he clearly knew he had to have a certificate of appropriateness to make exterior changes. I'm very puzzled then as to why he would remove the original windows even before seeking a COA. He must have known that windows are a significant exterior detail that must be handled according to a clear set of rules. That being true, and with Mr. Fell's hardly being a novice at dealing with such rules, why would he propose to replace the originals with similar but less satisfactory new windows? It's not at all surprising that the HPC would deny that proposal, and I'm glad they did. After that denial, Mr. Fell apparently decided to go to the opposite extreme, and now proposes perhaps the most expensive rebuilds of the windows. And that expense is then the basis for his claim of economic hardship? This doesn't quite make sense for me. I'm also puzzled at his argument that the HPC is somehow asking him to use a lower quality supplier for the rebuilt windows, when he apparently hasn't really investigated other sources for either quality or cost. Simply identifying his choice as the best available isn't documented in his application, in other words. Yet he also argues that the expensive supplier he proposes will cause him economic hardship. There seems to me to be some circular argumentation going on here. So ultimately, is Mr. Fell suggesting that if his request is denied, he won't pursue the project even though he has this much time and effort into it? I don't see such an intention stated in his application, but is it implied? Does he somehow expect the HPC to provide some means of lessening the burden of his own choice? What happens if the certificate is denied? What happens if it's approved? Will the house be left to deteriorate into nothingness either way? Thus, the whole proposal doesn't quite hang together for me. That seems to have been true for the HPC staff as well. Their report lays out quite clearly the various problems with this application for a COE. I encourage the commissioners to consider the staff report very carefully and to follow the staff's recommendation to deny this request. I hope that spurs a more thorough investigation of how to restore the windows in an economically more feasible way so that the building is preserved in a much-needed renovated state. Thanks. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. Do we have, Andrew, do you want to speak again as petitioner?
Yeah, I just want to make a brief comment that I kind of resent being called out as basically a liar in front of this body, and without all the facts, someone speaking for what I think doesn't sit well with me, so I take exception with a lot of stuff that was recently said. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Susan, our ordinance allows for people to cross-examine one another, and it's complicated and such, but do you have any questions of the petitioner or anybody on the commission?
I really don't. I primarily am just commenting on my reading of the documents that you received and saying what I think.
Okay, thank you. All right, and the other person in the audience is staff and will not be speaking, in case anybody wonders. All right, so we'll open it up for commission discussion then. Kim?
How much did it cost to restore your windows? How many were there?
22 sashes.
22 sashes?
There were 22 double-hung sashes, so it was 11 openings, and it was less than $7,000 for everything. I mean, removal of the trim, removal of the parting beads, the whole deal. I mean, literally, they came in and took them out, took them away, brought them back, put them back in, weather stripped them, replaced all the sash ropes, put everything back, and actually had to come back because when they did it, it was winter, and in the summer, when things swelled, things weren't moving properly, and they came back on their own dime and made the adjustments that were required.
And Gina, how long ago was this done?
Well, let's see, we just moved upstairs about less than 2 years, 2 years-ish ago.
So you know how to get a hold of the company, and there's still...
Yes, absolutely. I've actually, yeah, I have all the information.
And they're still in business?
Yeah,
Still there?
yeah, I made sure that they were still in business. Yep. I mean, you know, everybody gets to choose their own vendor, and I'm not saying that this vendor is the right vendor for this project. I'm just telling you my experience.
David?
Well, that's the sticking point. That's the point for me is that I don't have any basis for comparing with other estimates. And in Manhattan, the Mercedes garage charges $50 to check your oil. But you can get it checked by somebody else more cheaply, or you can, So it's the best place to go if you have a Mercedes, presumably, but there are, less expensive options. And so it just seems, what I'm hearing is that there is at least one possibility that's worth exploring. So what I don't understand is why, and maybe that was done or something, but it's just not part of the report. I mean, so that's, for me, one, a major problem.
Well, and then the prices for the finished carpentry, to me, don't seem out of line. Dave, you have more experience in this.
No, I don't think so.
So I look at the total cost, and if it's, say it's $7,000, and then you have all these additional costs plus the time, I mean, you're looking at close to $20,000, and that's over a year and a half, almost 2 years of rental income, investment income that you're losing. That is significant, I think. I think this is a hard question.
I think, the word substantial comes up, many times when we're supposed to determine what the hardship should be. So a substantial decrease in the fair market value of the property, we don't know if it's substantial or not based on staff report, and I think just common sense. A substantial decrease in the financial return to the owner of record as the result of a denial, everything's relative, right? What's substantial? I mean, $20,000 is certainly not substantial, and even the money that was put into my house for the windows was, in my opinion, for us, it was a good chunk of change. But it was a lot less expensive than replacing the windows, and it was a lot less expensive than another quote that we got. We also have a fan window up in our attic space that one of the local historic renovation companies did, and that was a nightmare. It needed to be epoxied back together. Some of the glass needed to be replaced, and it was less than one sash estimate from the other company. I think we know that, the structural soundness isn't affected, so that's a no-brainer, but that's not claimed either. The economic feasibility of the rehab or reuse of the existing structure, I don't think that the window replacement or renovation really affects that.
I agree with David that we just don't have enough really to compare to give a context for the estimate that we have included in this. So I think there's insufficient case made for a certificate of economic hardship.
So I think we do have the option to postpone if there's additional evidence required. Is that correct? But I know that also that the owner doesn't really want much more postponement.
Right. I mean, that is correct. If you want more information, you could wait till next meeting to address it. During the interim, we'd obviously get more information.
I have one other question. So there's a window in each of the bedrooms that needs to be replaced. So one bedroom has a gang of 3 windows. So one of those windows will not match the other 2. To me, I find that.
Well, you know, this has been a historic district since when, 2004, I think, National Register, and then a few years later it became a local historic district. So, I mean, it's been out there for a long time that these are protected properties. And, you know, I mean, there are rules to follow because of that. We need to make extra effort to be sure that the best solution is on the table to the highest extent possible. And you know, there are some of the bungalows that have integrity issues, but you know, they've been that way for a long, long time. They haven't been that way since the local designation was implemented.
I find this just really extremely difficult because he took a house that was falling apart that probably, I mean, the roof was caved in an area with a hole all the way down to the basement. And without this investment, this house may not have withstood a few more months or this winter of standing up. And here he's put in all this money, and we're asking him to put in an additional, even if it's only $12,000. I mean, if you look at the finished carpentry and a very reasonable window, you're asking him to give up a year of rental income for something that, I mean, he has saved this property. It puts me in a difficult situation. I see where the windows are a historic element that should be kept, but I also feel that this house was on the way to being destroyed. I mean, you go look at that district, and it really needs some help.
I hear you that, but then there too, I feel like I don't have enough information specifically. I mean, understanding that Mr. Fell is an expert at doing this kind of work, I would assume that the liability that would come with like dealing with windows would have been considered right from the start. So what I don't understand there too is there like a significant difference? Was there something revealed along the way that was unexpected, unusual, that wouldn't have been factored right from the beginning? I don't know what like the original expectation was and how that compares with how things have played out. So, and it may be that there's, you know, information there or a story there or something, and how that then would relate to what we're asked to consider here. That's the tricky part, because we can be sympathetic about all sorts of things, but, you know, when we look at what we're expected to take into account, I don't know how to connect whatever that would be with the specifics in this case anyhow. So, I mean, things are usually more expensive than one might imagine. But given the level of expertise and the knowledge that preceded the purchase, no doubt, I don't understand that yet. So.
Sometimes you can't foresee all the things you encounter.
Sure.
When you remodel.
And that's something, but that's something that architects also factor in, right? I mean, there is,
Contingency.
yeah.
But, I mean, to me, I guess I was confused about why the windows were taken out to begin with before we even had our first meeting to consider the historic certificate of appropriateness. So I have to wonder if there was just an assumption that the windows would be replaced from the start.
And there is something from the previous conversation that I was remembering when I was reading the new document, which is, as part of the conversation then, I believe it was said that the basements, the windows were there and they were in the basement, and that maybe all but one or two or three were in quite good condition. I mean, understanding that they'd have to be so maybe I misunderstood that. Apparently I misunderstood that because but I thought that they were intact in the house, but had been removed. But I didn't have a sense that they were like in pieces. Maybe one of them was in pieces. So,
Well, at least one was brought in here at our last meeting,
yeah.
right? One of the 9 lights.
So just in terms of understanding, like, that relative to how much would it cost to repair and restore them, the person who spoke in favor made the remark that their 9 light windows were not particularly expensive to deal with because they were in, quote, relatively good condition. And I don't know how these windows specifically compare with those windows in order to understand how much it would cost to do the job well, to do the job right.
I guess I'm also questioning, I mean, if the walls are going to be built out, what does that do for the new windows? And the current openings, right? So is all that finished carpentry work going to have to be done whether the windows get restored or replaced?
You can get jam extensions on new windows.
Okay. I'm not a replacement window
Can you
person.
speak in the microphone?
So a 4-inch jam extension?
You can get whatever jam extension you want.
Okay.
I think, Gina, if you have a question for the petitioner, I'm sure he could answer that for you.
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, okay, so first of all, for the windows, yes, I took them out. And Alice, I'm sorry, I took the windows out so I could keep this house from falling down, literally falling down. They were taken out, we took out the hinge pins, so that's all we did, take out the hinge pins and stack the windows in the basement. So when I bought the house, one window was completely gone, and that's one of the ones in one of the bedrooms that would be an egress window. And another one was just in pieces, and it was so rotted it won't go back together. The window that I brought in was probably middle of the road for the windows that were in the house. I would easily, more than half of them, have little metal L brackets on at least 2 corners because they're just rotted away. So that's kind of the status of the windows. And of the 13 windows, I think I have 8 or 9 storm windows. I don't have all the storm windows for them. So
Thank you.
the question about how the windows go in, a replacement window, at least I mean, you can do them several ways. In this case, they take off the casing on the outside, so basically casing the storm window sits against, that comes out, and the new window fits snug to there. So the outside face of the window is still in the plane it was in before. In this particular instance, my plan, if I'm using replacement windows, is I would use a drywall return jamb, so it's kind of like the windows behind you where they're not cased out on the inside, they're just drywall returns to the frame on 3 sides, and then there's a sill. So it's much, much easier to construct. So all that like messy finished carpentry, none of that has to happen.
Have you ever done a project before that kept historic windows, or that called for the restoration of historic windows?
Probably. I mean, I've done them. So, I mean, one of our professional projects, I mean, yeah, it's happened. I can't give you a specific example, but sure.
But you can't give a specific example?
We do 150 projects a year. No, I can't. Off the top of my head, no. Probably Indiana and Carl, we did it there. probably on the opposite corner of Indiana and Carl, we did that one too. So I'm, the house that Louise Cooney owns, we did that. So those windows were all restored. Taken to Chicago, by the way, to be restored.
Did that use Restoration Works for those windows, for Louise's?
Pardon?
Did Restoration Works do Louise's windows?
I don't know. I don't know who did them.
I have one more question while you're there. So, in looking back over the certificate of economic hardship, attachment 4 says that the cost comes at an estimated $23,400 to rebuild. So
Yeah, well,
would they
that-
make you brand-new windows? Because rebuilding to me means they're gonna make you,
No, well, no. They're making the storm windows I have missing to match the storm windows, so the profiles match, but they're not they're refurbishing, I would say.
okay.
But some of them they'll have to rebuild because there's pieces of the sash that are just unfixable with big hunks rotted out of them. So they're going to have to mill some of the wood for these windows.
Or architectural epoxy?
No, there's too big of holes for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any further thoughts? Well, I'll give it a try then. I move that we deny the certificate of economic hardship on the grounds that insufficient evidence was given to support the request.
Any discussion?
There's no second on it yet, so there has to be a second before we can discuss.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second by Dave Seiler, so now we can discuss, yes.
So if we deny this, what additional information would we require? Just another estimate?
I would say at least 2 more estimates. And just, to me, there are all these figures that have been thrown out. I just would want a clearer understanding, maybe in table form, as to replacement windows versus rehabbed old windows.
You mean in order to understand the differentials that we're really talking about? Because it's true, there's a lot of complexity to restoring them. And so just to kind of see those stacked out would be helpful. I agree. I mean, just to be able to see the
I've
difference.
just been taking notes, and I've got all these different figures in
Yeah.
different places, and it's just,
That's what I have to.
Yeah, and I'm right.
Oh, I just wanted to suggest that the motion that gets approved, whatever it may be, should probably be specific and address at least address the criteria in some way. So if it were a denial, there should be a statement that it doesn't meet the criteria.
I think, Kim, I think I'm with you, that maybe a continuance is more in line rather than a complete denial. Because, when we're looking at, Section 4, the factors and standards for our decision, just before that, at the end of Section 3, it says that the commission may solicit testimony to evaluate information provided either as part of or at the public hearing, and may continue the public hearing to provide time to evaluate any new evidence. So then, rather than, because if we deny this, we've kind of shut the door on it, and then it's going to, I would assume, more than likely get appealed. Does it make sense to just to ask that we get that more information and continue the hearing rather than denying it outright.
Then who is responsible for, like if we wanted 2 additional bids from other window companies that are not Restoration Works, then who's responsible for doing that?
Well, the burden in these cases is on the applicant. So those quotes, I suppose he would need to get those quotes. Obviously, they'd need to be reasonable.
For me, it's not just the quotes, it's the summary of the,
Yeah, the
if you replace it or if you have them restored. Because I have a lot of numbers written down here, and I add them up, and I would like to look at what the loss of income is too, added on to that. I'd like to see all of those kind of tabulated for me.
I agree with that, because without knowing the measure of that, then we don't know how, we don't know some of the relative terms like substantial, how it compares. I mean, if it was the other way, if new windows were put in, it's still going to have a cost, and that cost is presumably okay. So what we're being asked to assess is the relative consequence of something, and we can't know that until we have a set of estimates that are reasonable, but that allow us to see the total differences. I mean, I feel like I don't have enough information to judge that. And so if the strategy is without enough information, the only option is to deny. If that's the normal course of it, that's one thing. But if there's an opportunity to have the information in such a way that I and we can make that judgment, then that seems worthwhile.
So if you're leaning in the direction of continuing the public hearing, when we can do that, yes,
Yes, that's correct.
then we have a motion on the floor, so I'm willing to remove, if you remove the second, I would remove the motion.
Yeah, I'll remove the second, but one more point, it seems like if we want more estimates, it suggests we have some kind of a dollar amount that we'll think is a hardship and a dollar amount we think it isn't.
I don't know, for me, I just don't have enough information to,
So what do we do with these new estimates? I mean, is there going to be a point where we decide that's not a hardship anymore because it's reduced enough? I mean,
Possibly. I mean, I think we can't predict what we would do with the estimates until we have that information.
okay.
All right, so the second and the motion have been removed, so we have no motion on the floor at this time, if anybody wants to make a motion.
All right, Kim, you talked me into it. I'd like to move that we continue this hearing until whenever we can schedule our next meeting, so that we can obtain more information to make a definitive decision in this case. And the case being HP 2020 EH01.
Is there a second on that motion?
Second. Do we need to give guidance on what information we want? Because not only to me is it the monetary, it is the monetary, it's how it delays the project and that effect on the rental of the project and income coming in on the investment. I'm not a developer, I don't know what these things are, but
So you would like a deeper economic impact analysis of And you're essentially, it sounds like you want to know how much rental income it would be bringing in, and therefore the delay would be X amount of dollars if you're not having it rented for that period of time to get a better idea of the economic loss based on that time. I'm seeing nods and shakes and more nods.
I mean, for me, I would like something like in a table form that puts like costs together. Like certain expenses would be the same whether it's the replacement windows or not.
Okay.
And so I can't get a real handle on what the real cost is.
So a separate spreadsheet for restoration versus replacement. Are
I'd
you-
almost rather see like the items, like the furring out of the walls or the, whatever, the list of things that need to be done. Yeah, Kevin.
I've been informed that the applicant would like to be recognized.
Mr. Fell?
Mostly have a question. Follow-up to that, please let me know exactly what you want to see, because I don't want to come back again and go, no, that's not the information we wanted. That's number one. Number two, continuing this another month just compounds my problem. I understand why I have to do that, but extremely frustrating. And number three, what are my procedural options with a continuous? Can I appeal this to the city council still? Do I have to wait through this process to be denied and then appeal it again?
Also, according to, let's see, section 12(6)(d)(3) of the zoning ordinance, it says the commission may solicit expert testimony to evaluate information provided either as part of a certificate of economic hardship application or at the public hearing, and may continue the public hearing to provide time to evaluate new evidence. So I'd say with a continuation, it appears that the ordinance allows for a continuation to evaluate further evidence. And then after a decision would be made at that continued hearing, then you'd have the option to appeal.
Okay, so I have to wait till after the hearing and the commission makes a decision.
That's
And in the
correct.
meantime, your windows could be refinished during that time. Think about it.
Or the new ones could be ordered.
You could change your mind.
Thank you.
So,
So would you rather us vote on it and you be able to then go
That's
appeal
up to
it?
you. I mean,
Well, there was.
if
seemed
it
like
gets
you were
denied,
asking
I'm going to
that
appeal it,
question.
okay? If this decision is denied now or in the future, I will appeal it. So I will leave that up to you, but my economic hardship just goes up because the process is being delayed. So that's not my decision to make.
Are you open at all if there were much cheaper ways to get the windows redone? If that's still a possibility that's out there? I mean, if Gina's peeps,
Sorry.
if Gina knows people that could help, or maybe whoever did Louise Cooney's windows?
Sure, I'm open to that, but please understand the position of this economics for me, okay? Sorry to go over this again. Registration Works was $24,000 for these windows. In the numbers I used, I cut that in half to 12. Let's cut that in half again. Maybe we could do my windows for 6. Okay, then I'm still out $12,000 extra at a minimum, and probably more than that. So that's just the unfortunate reality of the situation.
could I ask a question? So if you went with a replacement window, so say we just all decided the heck with it, go for it, would they, what I think I'm hearing is that the window that you're thinking about buying is $500. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's
600,
I mean,
something like that?
I have the quote back there, but yeah, something
Ish?
like that. Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are they going to look like the windows that are currently there? Are they going to have 9 lights? Are they
Yes,
going to look
yes.
identical?
Yes.
Identical.
They're not true divided lights.
From 12 inches away, no. From 20 feet away, I doubt anyone will be able to tell the difference.
But they're not true divided lights, right? They're just flat muntins.
There's a muntin on the inside and one on the outside, and to be honest, I don't remember if that window has one in the center or not. I asked them to quote the windows that this commission approved me to use for the replacement windows. The window that sat here and you approved is the window that was quoted.
We only approved that for 2 uses, right? The kitchen where the elevation of the
Correct.
window was
Right.
being
Yes.
changed.
Yes.
And, yeah,
But yes, it's in a not true divided light, but it's in a pattern that matches the windows that are there, were there.
And would they be double hung, or would they
No,
swing
they're
out?
casement, outswing casement
Outswing?
windows. Because double hung windows, I mean, I'm putting in the safest windows I can, and those windows are too small as double hung windows to be very safe, so. And they wouldn't match anyway there. I mean, they need to be casement to match what was there.
And so you'd still have a requirement of needing a screen?
Yeah, yes,
They're
Yes.
inside screens?
correct.
Okay, thanks. Again, I don't know replacement windows. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
So we have a motion, was it second?
and we don't have a motion.
I made a
Oh,
motion to
sorry,
continue.
To continue, well, that's right.
Is there a second?
I don't remember.
Did you not second? Oh, I misremembered. that.
Oh, you seconded.
Did I?
Could you make the motion more specific? You said continue to the next meeting we can make or something like that.
Or the question was, can we be specific about the kind of information that
Right.
was,
Well,
you had that question?
Specific about, yes, the information that would be required, also specific about the date, which I believe is April 4th would be the next meeting. Let me make sure of that. Oh, I've got a calendar right here. I don't think that's right. Sorry, April 1st would be.
Are we ready to vote? Does anyone else have any new discussion to contribute?
So do we still need to be more specific about the information we're looking for?
Well, Alice, so you had mentioned more detailed budgets, so.
Yeah, I mean, if there's, I guess, the actions, there are certain things that are going to have to be done, whether it's putting the new windows in versus rehabbed windows.
Right.
And I don't have a grip on what the true added cost or less than cost would be for rehabilitated windows.
Right. So it's like a construction timeline, if we do restoration, we have to do these things, and it's going to
Right.
cost this and this and this and this. And if we restore, we have to do this and this and this and this and this and this.
Right.
And these are going to be similar costs, and these are additional costs with a total.
Yes.
Also,
David has a question, I think, too.
Oh, no, please, you had a follow-up or something to that.
in anticipation of the possible need for expert testimony, we were contacting several individuals to see if they would be available to provide expert testimony on the application. Bill Rose, who was with the Building Research Council, had said that he would be willing to review the application and, provide an opinion if that was necessary. So we could then provide him the current case information and any additional information that was provided or acquired, and then he could have that. Hopefully, we could request that he have an opinion written up for the next meeting, which would be part of the packet, as well as a supplemental memo.
I think that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I had a question, which is it reasonable and appropriate to understand what was anticipated, like in taking on the project and saying, what did one imagine the costs would be, in order to understand how, like, in terms of standards like a substantial decrease or a substantial, I mean, in fair market value, or a substantial decrease in financial return to owners, it seems like part of how I would understand substantial would not be a dollar amount, but it would be relative to what was anticipated, because if the project is significantly more expensive than I just would like to understand how this compares with what was anticipated, actually. Understanding that the windows are a very significant feature of this house. Is there something about the situation with the windows that makes it a reasonable basis for this appeal? I don't know if that's reasonable or not, to see it relative, like how the new budget compares with the anticipated budget, in order to, in a sense, locate the problem. Because what I mean, I'll just be honest about, like, what I wouldn't want the windows to pay the price of a cost that was unanticipated somewhere else. I know there are lots of surprises, and in trying to factor in how much does it cost to do a project like this, and where can costs be cut to compensate for an unexpected expense. Given what we're asked to assess and value, prioritize here, I wouldn't want the windows to be the thing that pays the price for some other unexpected cost, if that makes sense.
Windows pay
but-
the price in terms of being replaced?
Well, right, so that if there was another, let's say there was a problem, the roof ended up being much more complicated, much more expensive to deal with, then in order to keep the costs down, it's like, where can one save money? I don't know what was originally imagined the cost of restoring the windows would be, but I have to assume that it was part of the initial plan, given the historic consequence of this building. I mean, I have to assume that that was part of it. And so, in order to gauge something like a substantial decrease, and to say, okay, one would let this go, if it's not driven by something about the windows themselves, but instead it's a way to save money because there was an expense somewhere else, I would just want to see it. I want to understand the basis for gauging it. But I don't know. I haven't asked for something like that before in a context like this, so I don't know what's reasonable and appropriate. It would help me index the anticipated cost of the project at this stage relative to what was originally imagined it might be, and to locate the basis of the difference.
I think that's outstanding. Thank you. Could one of the things that is presented in evidence be dates or where within a project a window company might have been consulted?
Staff could ask for that information.
I just want to make sure that whatever decisions are being made tie back somehow to the criteria at hand. So if there were some way to tie that to the criteria, then sure. But just looking at them, I'm not sure how that timeline would help address those.
Relative to the point that I was raising, that for me, in number B, for example, in particular, substantial decrease in financial return to owners. In taking on the project, there must have been a business plan that presumably factored in the cost of restoring the windows. And since there's a hardship appeal, it means there's something about doing, I mean, which targets the windows. It means there's something about the windows that produces the hardship. But I have to assume that it was part of the business plan to begin with to address it. So it's a decrease in financial return to owners. Any cost is a decrease in financial return to owners. I mean, putting any money into this at all is a decrease, but it's relative to what's anticipated. So
I think I would maybe respectfully disagree, because what B says is a substantial decrease in the financial return as a result of the denial of the certificate of appropriateness. So to me, simply as a staff person, it's like, how much is it going to cost if it's restoration windows versus how much it's going to cost if it's restored windows? Regardless of what the original budget was, it's the difference between those two. Now then it's up to the commission to say, is that a substantial decrease or not? And financial return, is that short term, is that long term? That's where it's up to the commission to determine, what is substantial and what the long term or short term is. But as far as the original budget, I can understand the interest in wanting to see how things might have slid since then, but I don't think it requires submission of a business plan, which is where this sounds like the kind of trying to figure out what the original plan was for this project. That kind of seems to go towards economic viability of the project.
But what if the property owner's assumption all along was that the windows would be replaced without looking into we didn't really have any expert testimony on what the cost of rehabilitated windows would be? So, yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to see a business plan, but is there some kind of evidence that the windows were not excluded from the start in looking at a project of this magnitude with these restrictions on it?
I guess the cost of the proposed construction criteria is C, and an estimate of any additional cost that tries to get to, they should be able to provide two budgets, a restoration budget versus a replacement budget. And both of them should be within the petitioner's ability to perform. Otherwise, as I think you're alluding to, the path was, well, we're always going to assume we're going to get
Right.
replacement.
That's right.
So I think asking for the two budgets of restoration and replacement is absolutely appropriate and is math that can be done. And that might be the original business plan that we're getting back to. If that is sufficient, I think that's probably easier to get to than the original business plan and what the rental income is going to be and that kind of stuff.
Can we just ask him a few more questions now? Mr. Fell, can we ask you a few more questions, please? After Professor Hayes' comments, then it got me thinking as well, too. Was there a point, when did the windows factor into your thinking about this project? When did the windows ever become a thing where you knew you were going to look to see who could rehabilitate the windows, or?
Well, no, buying the property, I mean, obviously I knew it was a historic property, and there are certain things that need to be dealt with, primarily in this project, windows, because that was the biggest obstacle. And, I mean...
Why were the windows the biggest obstacle? With everything that was wrong with that house anyway?
It had to be approved by this board. The windows were the biggest obstacle.
So when you looked at the project before you came even to meet with us the first time, then you knew windows were going to be it?
Well, yeah, I've done this before, yes, absolutely. Right? But at that point, I had no basis of cost of what it's going to take to replace the windows or restore the windows. I mean, that's why I came here, because I discovered and ran through the cost of what it takes to restore them and what it costs to replace them. And that's The result of that is this meeting.
How do we quantify substantial decrease? I really just, I'm struggling with that. I need somebody to help me.
Well, I mean, I think that's why we're seeking more information, right?
Right.
To
But once we
try
have
to-
that information too, I'm just concerned, I'm gonna see this information and I'm gonna say, well, you know, it costs $24,000 more. Well, that's 2 years of rent and that seems substantial to me, but is it, I don't know how to, I feel like I'm gonna, is there more information that we should be requesting that, I don't know
Well,
how to-
perhaps, I mean, maybe this doesn't help, but, I mean, I included a spreadsheet of, I mean, I have hard costs for a bunch of things and estimates for a bunch of things, and those numbers add up to probably half again as much as this house is going to be worth when I'm done, okay? So if I take a $30,000 hit on the windows, it just adds to that exponential factor. I mean, taking $1 hit on this window still leaves me with a project when I'm done that costs me 1.5 times what it's worth to restore it.
But with all your experience, you must have known that that was a possibility in a project like this, particularly in the horrible condition that
Yes,
that place was
absolutely.
in.
And what I'm trying to do is being a good steward of this building and my community and
whoa
do it
on
in the
that.
most economical way I can do it.
I mean, you knew you were getting the National Register building as well as the local landmark
Yeah,
designation.
absolutely, yes.
We don't even have that many National Register buildings in this community, so. I mean, did you have a point where you were like, I know this building's a big deal, it's one of the most protected buildings in Champaign-Urbana, and I really want to do the right thing with it and do a rehab?
Yes, that's why I bought it. But there absolutely is a point of diminishing return, you know, and I knew that going into the project, and I'm willing to take that risk and to probably, well, absolutely spend more rehabbing this building than it will be worth at the end. That's a risk I was willing to take, but I want to minimize that risk as much as possible.
But, and as I hear you saying that, I mean, I'm understanding it to mean while respecting the terms, you know, given its protection status. So that's all the more reason why I feel like I want to continue the discussion, but I would like to know what estimates would be for restoring the windows, because that would be understood. It is understood. You've said it was, you knew that that was, you put it, the biggest obstacle. And so it seems perfectly reasonable to have a set of estimates, including the one that you have, in order to gauge what that actual cost is. I mean, otherwise the answer is the cheapest solution is the only viable solution. And if with a property of this consequence, it doesn't seem like that was ever understood by you or would be understood by anyone here to be the answer. Because that's...
No, I don't believe that's the answer, and that's not, I'm not proposing that.
So then I will just say I'm not sure why there aren't more estimates that would help me understand. That part I don't understand. There's been one estimate, and it's, you know, I guess everyone has a sense that it's the highest plausible estimate, but I don't understand if that's the interest, why there wouldn't be more estimates to find out what is the lowest cost at which the job could be done correctly. Is that an unreasonable question or expectation? I don't know.
Well, I would say, with the estimates I got for what has to happen after the windows are restored and I get them back, if I took all that money out, I get the windows and the storm windows rehabilitated for free, right? The extra money it costs me is still probably $8,000 at least altogether. That's if someone did the windows for free.
I hear you, and I've read your document. I mean, I read before you came here, and so when you gave testimony, the passion that was in your testimony was also in the document. But that doesn't somehow, to me, override the reasonableness of getting multiple estimates for this project in this context. I know.
You would like me to get written estimates from carpenters and people that are going to build me screens? You want all those written estimates for all that?
I don't know why it's unreasonable to imagine, like, what is the lowest cost at which to do this job correctly? Is that really unreasonable?
I'm sorry, but I thought I gave that to you. I mean, that's the information I gave you.
Well,
So-
I'm referring specifically to the high-end cost, I mean, to do the windows.
Restoration works.
Mhm.
Right, restoration works. But presumably, other than restoration works, just looking at that one piece of it, the work that they would do, is, if there were one or two other estimates that, for that, the work that they would do, is there someone who could do that piece of the work at lower cost? That's all I'm asking for. I don't think that that's unreasonable.
Yes, I understand that.
I'm not asking for every other thing to be re-estimated at all. I'm only asking for that piece, because it's been earmarked as something evidently beyond what most people would expect to pay. I mean, I've heard that from Gina.
Wait, can I get my paper for a second?
Yeah.
Gina, did you provide the name of your contractor for the windows to the city?
I did.
You guys have that.
Okay, I just wanted my numbers in front of me so I didn't talk totally off the top of my head. But again, let's say, for the sake of argument, Restoration Works or anyone else does this work for free. I get the windows back, the storm windows back, for free. Okay, I have to rebuild the jams. Okay, so that estimate was about $5,000. I have to adjust for the storm windows. I have to paint, caulk, put new hardware on, install weather stripping on the windows I get back, and I have to build screens. So all those together were $5,000, $1,000, $2,000, so we're at $8,000, so we're $12,620. That's if I get the windows back for free. So let's say I do that. All other things being equal, that's what this costs me additional.
I understand that. I saw that before. You said that before, and people commented on the reasonableness of those.
Right. So even if I get another estimate for restoring the windows that's free, it's still at $12,000. So would the body consider, I'll get the windows done for free, it's going to cost me, well, that's $12,000 plus the $5,000 of time I lose income. So $16,000.
The answer is yes, it's $16,000. I'm not sure how you want me to respond to that. It's
Well, I mean,
yes, that's what you're saying.
I'm trying to get a decision from this board because I really don't have another month to wait and then to appeal this decision. What I'm saying is, all things being equal, the windows are done for free. To get these windows installed after I get them back, $12,000 of labor, and I'm out 5 months of income, of rental income. So well, let's round it down. $15,000 this is going to cost me, minimum. I would say, to me, that's an economic hardship. So I'll leave that with you.
All right, we have a motion on the table with a second to continue the public hearing until our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is April 1st, with the expectation that there will be additional bids and clarification on the true expenses comparing replacement windows with historic window rehab. So do we want to take a vote on that? Additional discussion? Do we call the question?
Let's call the question. Any further discussion?
Do we need roll call for continuing? I wouldn't think so. But it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, let's do a roll call.
Okay.
How does that, so we just say continue?
Yeah, so this is
to continue the public hearing
correct.
with the expectation of the information that we've stated.
Yeah, I think
Would be
we,
provided.
so I simply say, yes, I think that I,
So when he calls your name, then you would say yes.
thank you, okay, got it.
Yeah.
And here we go. Mr. Hayes,
Yes,
Ms. Novak,
Yes.
Ms. Pegliuzzo,
Yes.
Mr. Seiler, and Ms. Smith.
Yes.
All right, so we have a unanimous vote to continue the public hearing, and that's public hearing HP 2020-EH-01. That will be continued to the next regular meeting date of the Urbana Historic Preservation Commission to be held April 1st. And do you have any questions? Okay. All right. On to new business and review of bylaws. I assume that's going to be Marcus?
Yes. So the HPC bylaws were last amended in 2014. City Clerk Charlie Smythe suggested that the commission should consider adding language allowing electronic attendance by commission members. This would allow them to attend by video or telephone conference if they cannot attend for
I had a
specific
Question about
reasons.
that.
Yes.
Didn't we do that once with David anyway?
yeah.
Okay.
It's not,
Oops.
yeah, right.
Okay.
So,
We did.
the attachment for the bylaws is modified simply by adding the new commission approval date and then adding in under Article 4 meetings, subsection attendance, stating that members may attend meetings by video or telephone conference in according with Illinois statute, et cetera, et cetera. This can only happen if a physical quorum is present. Gives specific reasons for this, can't just be vacation. And then you need to notify the secretary in advance so that we can make those arrangements.
Do you find that this is used very much with other commissions?
We just changed it for the Plan Commission, I believe.
Yeah, so the best example we have of this is City Council. They've had this on the books for, I think, at least 15 years.
Oh, wow.
They use it occasionally. I've only seen it, not that I go to every council meeting. I've seen it a handful of times in my almost 6 years here. So it doesn't get used really often, but it is convenient when, for example, there's an item that, say, somebody who is an expert in in a specific field might want to weigh in on a case. It's beneficial if they wanted to call in and weigh in.
Okay, any comments, questions, concerns about the proposed language change? For a motion, what all do you want to see? Can it just refer to the staff inclusion of, okay.
So if I understand correctly, if someone is simply on vacation or they spend their winter somewhere else, that's not a basis for calling in. Am I right about that?
That's true.
Yeah, so that it's only under these, on number 3, item 3, the only reasons for allowing it are those. If you happen to be on a trip, like that, too bad. Yeah, got it, okay.
Is anyone ready to make a motion?
I actually just had a question. Is there anything that anyone else thinks needs to be changed in the bylaws while we're doing this?
That's a large question.
I know. I mean, I don't know if anybody, went through and said, oh, maybe that looks iffy, or...
No, but it's not that hard to change bylaws, right? I mean,
This commission only, I believe, requires a single reading, unlike others.
yeah.
Oh, we
Okay.
can vote on one, like, immediately, no delay. Okay.
Okay.
And I would say that if you start thinking of things, make a list, and 6 months or a year, we can talk about it ahead of time. This was kind of something that was brought up by city clerk, and it was the one thing that we weren't doing here already. But if there are other things that you would like to do, I don't see any reason why we can't take care of the one and then come back and do it, things later.
Is there, under 3, are there any other conditions that would be reasonable? So, such as, for example, religious reasons. I mean, maybe there's a reason one couldn't travel, but one could still, I don't know if there are other, or if this is the same, are these the same terms and used elsewhere, like in...
Yes, so this is this is pulled directly from the state statute.
Okay.
So I think that's the recommendation from the clerk, is just to match the state's rules. So that's why they're proposed
Got it.
like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Need a motion?
Sure do.
I move we adopt the revisions to the bylaws as submitted.
Do you want to specify video or phone conferencing?
The
Yes.
bylaws as they pertain to video
Okay.
and telephone conference.
Okay.
Attendance to meetings.
That's fine.
Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
Jean is in with the second. Okay, any additional discussion? All those in favor, we don't need, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimous approval of the bylaws changes, yay. Next item is monitoring of historic properties, and I'm reminded that I was supposed to do a letter, which I haven't done, so I will, yeah, bad girl, all right.
I noticed that 2 of the 3 signs in front of the ZTA house were down.
Oh, who made that phone call?
That's fabulous, because I think I drove by there 2 days ago, and they were still up or something, or late last week. Okay.
Two, they're still on, but
So thank you all very much for being proactive and letting staff know, and you can always call or email. You don't have to wait for a meeting to bring stuff. So I spoke with Jonah Weisskopf, who owns the Freeman and Sutton houses. He said that he did he installed these railings under the requirement of his insurance company for liability reasons. He was planning on installing permanent railings and perhaps permanent step railings and perhaps a porch railing on
502.
on the Sutton House, 502. But he knew, I informed Jonah that permanent work would require a certificate of appropriateness. He understood that. I told him probably that a comprehensive project of replacing the wooden steps, replacement or stabilization of the existing concrete steps, adding a new porch railing, and installing 3 new stair railings would constitute a major work under porches, decks, and attached steps, and would require coming to the HPC. He understood that. I directed him to submit a certificate of appropriateness application for the June 3rd meeting, which would give him enough time to get quotes and estimates together. He said he'd like to do something, historically appropriate. And we would also work with Building Safety Division to figure out what things are required. They did confirm that I think over 40-inch change in elevation would have required railings anyways
So we'll-
from building safety issues.
We just have to be careful in not coming up with some pretend look that isn't rooted in historic photographs or something.
Right.
So Jonah was in touch with me, and I've got some people looking to try to
Great.
find a photograph to see if there was a railing there even.
Okay.
I have some neighbors that live diagonally across the street from me who, rather than putting railings, added landscaping. Right. So rather than having to add railings, they just brought the elevation of the grade
Oh.
up.
Oh, okay. All right.
That might be,
That's,
So and because it is a rental property and because the initial reason he did this was for, not for city requirements, but for the insurance company, whatever got done would need to meet the needs of his insurance company, but this gives us some time to work things out. And I will attempt to, periodically check in with him and see how things are going and get questions answered and whatnot. And then also spoke with Pierre Moulin about the ZTA house, and he understands that even the sign that is there remaining, he's permitted one, we call it a subdivision sign that identifies the property. On a historic site, though, that would require I sent him a letter, a certificate of appropriateness, and I think as a minor work, but I will double check that. If it's a minor work, it would be administratively done, and it wouldn't have to come to you. And then he would also be permitted a property exchange sign up to 10 square feet in area, and we would work with them to try and do something historically appropriate.
So major does require HPC review.
Yes, a major does. So it does, with this.
That's a sign, permanent sign.
if it's a
Okay,
permanent
all
sign,
right,
it
so
says-
then both of them will be coming to you.
But if it's a temporary sign, it's exempt.
Yeah,
Right.
but what's temporary?
30 days per year. So even the signs that are property exchange signs, it says they're allowed to show those when there's a vacant unit, and we don't police or try and figure out when a unit is vacant. So those property exchange signs can just be
because they're familiar with
considered
the rest of
to
us
be
out there.
permanent, right. So, we will, I directed him to plan on, getting rid of those other two signs before the end of the month, meaning February, and then the final subdivision sign, he's going to have 3 more months to work on that. The size that's out there now is permitted for a subdivision sign, but it's going to have to be, presumably you will want something a little nicer looking than that. Perhaps, though, some direction about for the property exchange sign, that can either be wall-mounted or freestanding, the 10 square foot one. Would the HPC have any guidance on whether they would rather see, it would basically be run by Chateau Normand, www. Whatever phone number for information? Would you prefer that to be freestanding in the yard or on the wall of the building?
Oh, boy, freestanding, yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Ms. Novak is going to compose a letter for the Dairy Barn Manager's House.
Yeah.
There were, I believe, 2 or 3 sash windows missing that had been boarded up, so it wasn't open to the elements except for the enclosed front porch storm door was missing a sash. So the front porch is open to the elements, but the door is intact on the inside. And that's the end of the monitoring report.
I actually just wanted to let everyone know that I went by Mumford the other day and realized that it looks like the university has actually maybe done foundation work. So the east wall was completely bowing out when I took pictures, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and it is straight as an arrow now. Everything's re-tuck pointed, although it looks like a couple of the basement windows that used to be there are gone.
They've torn the porch off, though.
Well, that was, I mean, I know.
Yeah.
I know, they did. But at least the foundation looks like it's been newly done. New brick, I think the old brick is still behind,
Mhm.
but new brick,
So.
new tuck pointing. So at least the foundation work looks like it's been done. The rest of it, though, there's, holes in some of the fascia. There's, in the front bay window, there's separation between the trim boards. There's areas where the squirrels have eaten through. So the foundation work looks good. The rest of the house is still about where it was a year and a half ago.
So is this a listed landmark property in Urbana?
National
Well,
Register.
yeah,
National Register.
it's on campus, so,
Yes, it is.
yeah, farmhouse. It's called farmhouse.
Yeah, clever.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything for monitoring? Staff report? All right, study session, discussion of activities for Historic Preservation Month.
Use the restroom.
Yes,
Run!
Before we do that.
point of personal privilege.
Or is it point of personal privilege?
We're going to stay in place, but have a brief recess. We're back from commercial break now. Yes,
Okay, ready?
yes. Marcus, did you have anything you wanted to present on this, or we're on our own, or?
Due to staff constraints, there is not a lot of city time, staff time. I think supplies and sorts of things are able to be done, printing up brochures, flyers, helping with advertising. We have folks that can help with that. We've got good staff for that. But as far as selecting an event or activity or something, implementing, carrying off that activity, that is hopefully can be done by our fabulous Historic Preservation Commission. And I don't want to throw Renee under the mass transit, but I think she was interested in helping with this kind of stuff when I talked with her when she came on to the commission. I would say that probably for me, the most obvious activity would be doing a downtown Urbana National Register Historic District walking tour.
Yep.
And maybe even wandering then over to the hotel and see how construction is going with that. But there are lots of other great ideas on there as well. Wanted to bring it up as early as possible. No decision needs to be made tonight. If there are questions or ideas that you want to bounce back to staff in the interim, we can revisit this next month.
Okay, I don't think this is too early at all, really,
Okay.
if we're going to get anything done. Can you correct the spelling of Dave Seiler's last name?
Absolutely.
To Seyler instead of Seiler on the Preservation Month ideas. And it's in that first bullet pointed, got it?
SEYLER.
Ler.
Yes. I think I had started this list many, many months ago before David and I hooked up, but yeah, there's no reason for
Okay.
mistakes and
Thank you.
misspellings.
And thank you for including all the past activities. I think that was very helpful, and it's been great to get the support from the city that we've gotten for so many years, and you've joined a good place.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
So, just in the effort of time, I agree with Marcus that I think the Downtown Historic District walking tour would be our best bet. And I think we just need to figure out how to pull it off. Then, also, I love the idea of the hotel. How,
Me too.
how would that work? I mean, you would just put me in touch with them and I would, or,
Well, I'm kind of negotiating with other community development services staff. You know, they've been in contact with them through the purchase. We're trying to make sure that they're planning on doing their renovations in keeping with national standards and requirements. They're still planning on coming here and presenting it all for the local certificates of appropriateness. And when the timing is right and the stars align, we're going to ask them, hey, we understand that you're really wanting to move quick on this because they're talking like working on this year. Would it be possible to do something where the public might be able to see something at a certain time when it's a stable construction site? Hey, by the way, Historic Preservation Month is in May. Even if you haven't broken ground, could we at least maybe walk in the foyer or something? These are all just my ideas, nobody else's. But basically, you know, open the idea to them as early as possible. And, you know, I can talk with Lori Pearson and Brandon Boyce. If you want to throw yourself out there as a chair and, you know, university expert to be saying, you know, we'd like to showcase, you know, this gem that's getting fixed up, maybe that would swing more than a staff person.
okay, yeah, no, I think everybody agree that that's a good thing too. So then I sort of played this other role of also doing things with PACA on the PACA board. Susan Apple out there is president of PACA. And then I just do this research thing on the side. So Brian Adams, whom many of you know, has agreed to do a lecture on the hotel,
Great.
just on the hotel,
great.
which I
That would
think
be
would be
wonderful.
a great precursor to doing a tour. So we have the library auditorium reserved for May 7th.
That's fabulous.
Awesome.
So that might be a good thing to go together. And then Brian and I, for a number of years, have been doing the How to Research Your Old House thing.
That's great, yeah.
And so I think we're on for that. I've got so many dates on here. Either the 14th or the 21st would be the How to Research Your Old House in the library.
May, again, obviously.
Yeah. And then we also have the auditorium reserved for May 28th, but I'm looking for somebody new and different for giving a lecture. So I don't know if you know other people, or we can ponder on that. We can also coordinate with PACA if, you know, maybe. If PACA wants to play with us and
Do you think Perry might be interested in doing anything for Champaign County Historical
I
Society?
don't know, I was thinking like somebody from out of town that would be new and different that we haven't seen before, but,
You know, Rachel Leibowitz now teaches in New York State.
Mhm.
They'll be done with her semester.
Oh.
And she just came and gave a talk for Bob Riley's memorial service, which was
Oh.
about preservation initiatives she'd been involved with, including, you know, here in Illinois, when she was in Springfield. And
that would be
it was
good.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds
She's the
great.
former director of the Historic Preservation Services,
Illinois.
yeah.
That'd be
And she's the
great.
first person to receive a PhD in landscape architecture here at the university.
Wow.
So she could be,
That's a great
she
idea.
knows the context really well.
Yeah.
And she was, the main point of her lecture was about preservation as allowing communities to keep telling stories that have been important to them. And the response was very powerful from people who had thought of preservation always in exclusively materialist terms. And so she looked at the race riot site in Springfield and how she was able to work with the powers that be to get the anticipated train lines moved so that that site, which was so important to the community, could be
Yeah.
preserved.
Yeah,
Actually, there was a lot of emotion contact too, because it's, like I said, it's- so.
That
we can-
sounds
we-
great.
We both know Rachel really well, we could reach out to her and see if she's gonna be around. Yeah.
May 28th, perfect date.
What's it?
Didn't you say you have the library reserved for May 28th?
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, I mean, we've been working with the library for several years and stuff too, so.
Right.
All right, so that library stuff is kind of a no-brainer, it's almost all figured out, but then we need to figure out what kind of tour we want to do and how we're going to make that happen.
Is there perhaps a sub-select group of commission members that would want to organize this outside the meeting, or do you want
We could,
to, and I'm always only an email away, or I can be sitting in the room with you in our
so how many of us
conference
can
room?
meet, though? Can 3 of us meet?
Oh, I believe, and I believe if it is considered a committee that is discussing and planning things but doesn't take action on anything, that it's not acting as the commission,
Mhm.
it's acting as an ad hoc planning group. I will confirm that with Mr. Smith, Charlie.
Okay.
Okay.
Who would be interested in participating in the committee? How about it, Gina?
Yeah.
David?
Sure.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, the rest of you are going, "Phew."
And will you get in touch with Renee?
I would be glad to.
All right, so then we can figure out whether we even want to think about going in any properties, if that, how likely do you think that would be?
I've already discussed things with Dan Maloney back when we did the video there and let him know that,
Okay.
you know, Historic Preservation Month would be a great opportunity to come back out, especially, you know, to see it more done. And he expressed an interest at that time in showing folks around, giving a little spiel. I'm not going to remember her name, but the folks who just bought David Kraft's property
Betsy.
a few months
Oh, yeah.
back.
I know
Right,
Betsy, I can
think
ask her.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So I think frankly,
Christina,
The
yeah.
Whitaker Building.
Yeah,
as many folks as you want to wander through their properties or have them come out and give a 3 or 4 minute spiel, I think the more the better, but I can also see, you know, May, you might not want 32 different little spiels being given. But you
Mhm.
start off with asking your first set of candidates, and if you got all you need, then you don't ask anymore, but you
Mhm.
have a second round of candidates as backups.
okay.
And then maybe we could arrange something for, you know, a hotel representative to talk about their plans, if folks
Yeah, I would
wanna
see
do
the
that.
hotel thing as a separate
It-
bit of excitement.
So I could see doing the lecture, and then if, you know, maybe as a separate event, and then you, that day you wander over and get to see the thing that you just got done being lectured
I
about.
think that would be good.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's on the 7th?
And if
Yeah, but that was just, yeah, I mean, we can rearrange it if we have to,
Right.
but we do have the library auditorium, so
Right.
it's kind of hard to get that.
Well, then maybe the fact that there is already a lecture scheduled and a date set for that, that might help prompt that discussion with the hotel folks. Since something has already been planned on our end, that we can ask them about, rather than there being nothing, and then
Yeah,
we're kind of.
so I think the lecture is, the 7th is on a Thursday, I think?
Okay,
I'm not sure.
like a Thursday evening then?
Yeah, so maybe we could do it on the tour thing on the weekend.
Okay.
Mm.
And then we could still try and play off that with them. Hey, we're planning on having a lecture on Thursday, and folks will be really jazzed about it, and would you be willing to do something, you know, that following weekend, a Saturday or Sunday? And you could bill it as a 2-part event for those who would like to have the field component. You
Yeah.
can come back out.
No, I think that would be great. All right, any other comments or anything before we take this off to committee? No?
I'll help in any way I can.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, any announcements? No. Okay, I think we're ready to adjourn. Anybody have anything else?
I am going to throw out there that there's going to be Downtown Dialogues event. It's a 3-day program. Susan, PACA was offering a scholarship to attend this.
Just to cover the registration
Right.
fee, but.
Right. So it's about the Main Street program, and according to the email from PACA, it sounds like no Illinois municipalities, or is it no Champaign County municipalities participate in this Main Street program, which, you know, promotes downtown revitalization and community development and those sorts of things. If a commission member wanted to go, here's a thing that you can go spend 2.5 days at if you like. I'm going to see if I can maybe go as well.
Good.
From that.
Great.
Deadline for applying for that $50 grant is,
Friday, yes.
This Friday is the deadline?
yeah.
Friday,
For the PACA grant. yeah.
Friday, March 6th is the deadline for the PACA grant to go to the Main Street Conference in
Correct.
Springfield.
And
And that conference is in later April,
March
No. Oh, it's March.
18th through
Oops.
20th.
fast.
March 18th through 20th, coming up fast,
We
okay.
appreciate PACA
I'm just
sending
repeating
us
it
the
because you're
flyer
not
for
on the
that.
microphone. Okay, ready to adjourn?
I'll move.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, we're adjourned.